Today, we are taking a deep dive into an incredibly comprehensive set of clinical data and epidemiological tables focused entirely on adult vaccination. And our mission today is to completely shatter that childhood-only misconception. Because, as we are going to see, our immune systems change dramatically as we age. That childhood immunity you built up, it gradually fades. These treatments are actually designed to act as a dynamic, lifelong shield.
And the stakes of maintaining that shield could not be higher. Right off the bat, the global data highlights a staggering reality. Between the years 2000 and 2019 alone, global vaccination programs prevented an estimated 37 million deaths worldwide.
Okay, let's unpack this 37 million deaths in less than 2 decades. That is the entire population of Canada just saved.
Yeah, it's almost hard to wrap your head around.
It is. That is not just a triumph of modern medicine. That represents millions of families saved from unimaginable tragedy. Millions of people who got the chance to grow up, to have careers, and to live out their lives simply because a preventable illness was, well, prevented.
It is an incredible baseline. But to truly grasp why you must maintain this shield throughout your entire adult life, we first need to look at the historical data from when these shields were initially deployed. We have to understand how drastically these interventions altered human history.
And the numbers don't lie. Looking at the pre- and post-vaccine statistics from the clinical tables, it is honestly mind-blowing. Let's look at India, for example. In the 1970s, India was seeing 200,000 to 400,000 cases of polio every single year.
Which meant hundreds of thousands of children facing paralysis.
Exactly. And cut to the recent data, 0. India has been completely polio-free since 2012. That is essentially a 100% reduction.
And we see the same thing with measles there, falling from an estimated 13 million cases a year to around 12,800. Diphtheria dropped from 100,000 down to just under 4,000.
Wow.
And neonatal tetanus, which was claiming 80,000 newborns annually around 1980, eliminated. 0 cases.
And we see the exact same dramatic impact mirrored in the United States data, too. Before the vaccine era, the U.S. averaged over 29,000 cases of smallpox annually. Now, 0. Paralytic polio went from over 16,000 cases to 0.
Right, and measles dropped from over 500,000 cases a year to just 47 in 2023.
Just 47, that's a 99% drop. Even something we used to think of as an inevitable childhood rite of passage, varicella or chickenpox, went from over 4 million cases a year down to under 27,000. It's like looking at the crime statistics for a major city after a highly effective neighborhood watch program gets installed on every single street. The biological threats didn't pack up and leave the planet.
No, they're still out there.
Right, the criminals are still out there in the environment. Our bodily defenses simply became impenetrable.
What's fascinating here is that it's so easy to get lost in these massive multi-million figure drops.
Mm-hmm.
We become numb to the statistics, but behind every single digit of that 99 or 100% reduction is a real person who didn't contract a devastating, suffocating illness.
Yeah.
It's a family that didn't have to sit vigil by a hospital bed.
So, if those biological criminals are still out there lurking, how exactly do these tiny vials of liquid teach our bodies to fight them off? I mean, I know we hear the word immunity a lot, but what is actually happening under the hood?
Well, if you look at the immunology data, you can actually think of your body like a highly trained security team. You have guards, surveillance cameras, and a rapid response unit.
Okay, I like that visual.
But there's a massive biological vulnerability. When a novel virus appears a threat your body has never seen before, it takes days for the security team to recognize the danger, analyze its structure, and mount a proper targeted defense.
And during those days of delay, the virus is just freely replicating inside your cells and you're getting sicker and sicker.
Precisely. So the vaccine basically bridges that dangerous gap in time.
It's a training exercise.
Exactly. Vaccines are essentially a training exercise for your security team. We introduce a harmless picture of the threat or a disabled version of the bad guy. We let the immune system practice its response. They learn the exact molecular profile of the intruder.
So when the real virus shows up months or years later, there is 0 hesitation. The team neutralizes the threat before it can replicate enough to make you feel symptoms.
You've got it.
And what's incredibly cool is that modern medicine has developed several different teaching styles for this training exercise. For instance, you have live attenuated vaccines. These are things like the MMR and varicella shots. They use a living but severely weakened version of the virus.
Right. It's like sparring with a boxer who has their hands tied behind their back. It gives your body a highly realistic workout, creating incredibly long-lasting immunity.
But for some people, even a weakened live virus is too risky, which is where inactivated vaccines come in. Things like the polio and hepatitis A shots.
Yeah, those use dead virus particles.
Subunit or recombinant vaccines. Instead of the whole virus, they just use a tiny specific piece of it, an antigen, which is basically just a biological ID tag that triggers your immune system.
The Shingrix vaccine for shingles and the HPV vaccine use this method.
And then there are conjugate vaccines, like the pneumococcal shots. I love the mechanism here. Some bacteria wear a biological invisibility cloak made of sugar, which lets them sneak past our guards. A conjugate vaccine takes a piece of that sugar cloak and links it to a strong, highly visible protein. It basically slaps a neon orange vest on the invisible intruder so your immune system can't miss it.
That's a perfect way to visualize it. And of course, we now have mRNA vaccines, like the ones developed for COVID-19. Instead of introducing any part of the virus itself, mRNA is literally just a temporary instruction manual.
Just teaching the cells what to do.
Exactly. It teaches your own cells how to quickly manufacture a harmless viral protein. Your immune system spots this foreign protein, learns to destroy it, and the instruction manual dissolves completely.
Okay, but I have to jump in here and push back on something because this is the number one thing you hear every single flu season. If we are putting pieces of these bad guys into our bodies, even dead ones, or just their ID tags, why do half the people I know swear the flu shot gave them the flu?
Right, I hear this constantly.
I mean, I've gotten the shot and felt pretty awful the next day with a fever and an aching arm.
I am so glad you brought this up because it's a very common, yet completely biologically impossible misconception. The injected flu vaccine contains absolutely no live virus. It's an inactivated vaccine, just the mugshot. It cannot, under any circumstances, replicate and give you the flu.
Then what exactly is happening when someone feels crummy, tired, and feverish the next day?
That low-grade fever, the fatigue, or the sore arm, that isn't you getting sick from a virus. That is exactly what we want to happen. That is your immune security team going into high alert.
Oh, wow.
The vaccine sounded the alarm, and your body is raising its temperature and rushing inflammatory cells to your arm to fight what it thinks is an invasion. It's your body's way of saying, message received, we're running the drill, and we are on it.
That makes total sense. It's the feeling of the defense system working, not the feeling of an attacking virus. But that raises another question. If our security team is so smart and it learns the faces of these biological criminals so well, why do we have to go back to training camp every single year? We are told to get our flu and COVID-19 vaccines every fall. Why the annual routine?
It comes down to the sneaky, unstable nature of certain viruses. The influenza virus mutates constantly through a process called antigenic drift. It is essentially changing its disguise every single year.
So it's never the exact same bug twice.
Exactly. The clinical data uses a great analogy for this. Trying to use last year's flu vaccine to fight this year's flu virus is like trying to use last year's computer password to log into your email.
Yeah.
It simply does not grant you access to the defense you need against the newly updated threat. The same logic applies to COVID-19. As the virus evolves, the vaccine formula must be updated annually to match the new variants.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. People often judge the flu shot as a complete failure if they get a mild case of the sniffles later in the winter. They say, see, it didn't work.
Right, they see any symptom as a failure of the vaccine.
But the data shows the true value proposition. Getting that annual flu shot gives you a 40 to 60% reduced chance of ending up in the hospital. It turns a potentially life-threatening event into a weekend on the couch.
Which is a massive win.
Definitely. And for folks aged 65 and older, the guidelines specifically recommend a high-dose or adjuvanted version of the vaccine.
Yes, and we should explain what an adjuvant actually is. As we age, our immune system naturally gets a little slower, a little harder to wake up. An adjuvant is an ingredient added to a vaccine that acts as a biological alarm bell. It intentionally causes a bit of local irritation at the injection site to practically scream at an older immune system, hey, pay attention to this.
Yeah.
It ensures a much stronger, more durable immune response.
So we need annual shots for viruses that constantly mutate. But what about a threat that never changes its disguise? A threat that we simply forget about because it's hiding in plain sight.
You're talking about tetanus.
The classic rusty nail. It's terrifying when you really look at the biology. Tetanus doesn't mutate like the flu, it just lives quietly everywhere. It's in the soil in your garden, it's in dust, it's in manure.
And here is the chilling reality highlighted in the epidemiological data. Globally, between 30,000 and 60,000 adults still die from tetanus every single year.
In the modern era, with all our medical advancements, how is that possible?
Because of an incredibly unique, dangerous biological quirk. You cannot get natural immunity from surviving a tetanus infection.
Wait, really?
Really. Most diseases, if you survive them, your body remembers them forever. But the lethal dose of the tetanus toxin is so microscopically tiny that it can literally kill you before your immune system even registers that it exists in your bloodstream. Your body just doesn't remember it.
Wow. So the infection kills you without ever triggering the immune memory.
Exactly. The only way to protect yourself is the vaccine. Specifically, the Tdap vaccine, which covers tetanus, diphtheria, and pertussis, also known as whooping cough. You get the initial series, but then you absolutely must maintain a routine booster every 10 years. Or, if you get a dirty wound, every 5 years. But adults simply forget to maintain that decade-long schedule because it's not on their radar.
But there's one time when that Tdap schedule becomes incredibly urgent, and it's heavily emphasized in the clinical guidelines for pregnancy. The recommendation is to get a Tdap dose during every single pregnancy, usually between 27 and 36 weeks.
Yes, it's a crucial window.
And the biological mechanism here is just beautiful. It's not just about protecting the mother. When she gets that vaccine, her body creates a massive surge of antibodies. Those antibodies then actively cross the placenta into the baby's bloodstream.
They do the heavy lifting for the newborn.
Exactly. They essentially act as a biological rental car for the newborn's immune system, wrapping the baby in a protective shield against whooping cough before they're even old enough to get their own first round of shots. It's the ultimate gift from a mother to her child.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we see that our immune system's journey is incredibly dynamic. We start life borrowing our mother's immunity, but as we navigate through the decades, our own internal security system naturally ages right alongside us. Our defense requirements shift dramatically depending on the chronological milestones we hit.
So if a mother's immunity acts as a rental car for the baby, what happens as our own biological vehicle starts racking up the miles?
Well, the schedule has to adapt.
Right, the clinical schedule actually breaks this down by age. If you're a young adult, say 19 to 26, the primary focus is catching up on the HPV vaccine, which, let's just pause and appreciate, is literally a vaccine that prevents multiple types of cancers from ever forming.
It's astounding.
But the landscape really changes when you hit 50.
Yes, age 50 is a major biological threshold. This is when the pneumococcal vaccine is introduced for high-risk patients to prevent severe pneumonia. But more universally, age 50 is when the shingles vaccine, known as RZV or Shingrix, becomes essential.
And this is because the threat isn't something you catch from a doorknob. The threat is already inside the house.
Precisely. If you had chickenpox as a child, and almost everyone from a certain generation did, that virus never left your body.
Never left?
Nope. After you recovered, the varicella virus retreated and went dormant deep inside your dorsal root ganglion, which is a cluster of nerves near your spinal cord. It's been sleeping there for decades.
That is so creepy to think about.
It is. But as you hit 50 and your immune system naturally weakens, the virus can reactivate, travel down your nerve pathways, and erupt as shingles. And the clinical description of shingles is harrowing. It is a relentless burning pain. For some patients, it causes a condition called postherpetic neuralgia, where the excruciating nerve pain never fully goes away, even after the rash heals.
Which is why the data on the Shingrix vaccine is an absolute medical marvel. Shingrix is a recombinant subunit vaccine, meaning it just uses that highly visible ID tag we talked about earlier, and it is 97% effective against shingles in adults 50 and older. 97%. You just don't see numbers like that very often in medicine.
You really don't.
Yeah.
And as we move further up the age milestones, the shield adapts again. Between 60 and 74, RSV protection, respiratory syncytial virus, is introduced for those at high risk.
Okay, and then at 65.
At 65, as we mentioned, the switch is made to those high-dose adjuvanted influenza vaccines. And by age 75, that RSV vaccination becomes a universal recommendation. It provides lifelong protection with a single dose against a virus that quietly kills thousands of older adults annually by filling their lungs with fluid.
So aging is a universal experience, and the schedule adjusts for the natural slowing down of our immune system. But what happens if your baseline health is already compromised? What if you have a chronic condition like diabetes or heart disease?
That's a huge concern for a lot of people.
Right. It's so easy to see how a patient might feel like their body is already fighting a war on 3 fronts, and they might think, I'm just too sick to handle a vaccine right now. Let's not rock the boat.
That is a very common sentiment reported by doctors, and it is entirely understandable from a psychological perspective. When you feel fragile, you don't want to invite more stress into your body. But the medical reality dictates the exact opposite. If you have a chronic condition, you are not too sick to get vaccinated. You're actually too important not to get vaccinated.
It's like having a house with a damaged foundation. You wouldn't skip installing a security system because the house is fragile. If anything, you need the security system more, because a break-in, in this case, an infection, would cause total structural collapse.
That's a perfect analogy.
Yeah.
Let's look at diabetes. High blood sugar actually impairs white blood cell function. Because of this, patients with diabetes have a significantly higher risk for severe, life-threatening complications from run-of-the-mill pneumonia and the flu.
Which is terrifying.
Right. And furthermore, the guidelines now recommend universal hepatitis B vaccination for adults under 60 with diabetes due to the increased risks of infection associated with blood sugar monitoring.
And for patients with heart or lung disease, a severe respiratory infection like the flu, COVID-19, or RSV puts an immense, sometimes fatal strain on organs that are already struggling just to keep oxygen flowing through the body.
Then there's a very specific critical case of patients without a functioning spleen, a condition known as asplenia. The spleen is basically the blood's oil filter. It is a critical hub for the immune system. Without it, the body is highly vulnerable to those encapsulated bacteria we mentioned earlier, the ones wearing the slippery sugar invisibility cloaks. A healthy spleen filters those out. A body without a spleen cannot. Therefore, these patients absolutely require highly specific conjugate vaccines like the MenACWY and MenB vaccines, which protect against different strains of meningococcal disease, and the HIV vaccine. Without these specific shots, these patients can face overwhelming, fatal infections from bacteria that a healthy person would fight off without a second thought.
Honestly, when you lay it all out like this, we're talking about millions of doses of different vaccines highly recommended across varying ages and incredibly complex health conditions. But a very fair question you might be asking right now is, how do we actually guarantee they are safe once they leave the pristine, tightly controlled environment of a clinical trial? How do scientists monitor millions of doses in the messy real world?
This raises an important question, and it's one the public health sector takes incredibly seriously. The clinical data outlines a massive, multi-layered national safety net that constantly monitors vaccine safety. First, there is VA-ERAS, the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System. This is an early warning system where literally anyone, a patient, a parent, a doctor, can report any health event they experience after a vaccination.
See, honestly, when I hear that anyone can just go online and upload a side effect to VA-ERAS, my first thought is, doesn't that make the data incredibly messy? I mean, if I get a vaccine on Tuesday and break my arm in a car crash on Wednesday, I could technically report that to VA-ers. How do scientists separate pure coincidence from a real vaccine reaction?
That is the exact limitation of VAERS. It is just a signal generator, not proof of cause, which is why the second layer exists, the VSD, or Vaccine Safety Data Link. This is active, rigorous surveillance.
So they're actually digging into the data.
It's exactly. Researchers continuously compare the electronic health records of over 8 million vaccinated and unvaccinated people. So if VAERS is a bunch of people calling in to say they smell smoke,
Yeah.
the VSD is the scientist checking the actual temperature sensors in the building to see if there's a fire. If a rare side effect is genuinely linked to a vaccine, the VSD will spot the statistical anomaly immediately. There's also CISA, which provides expert medical consultation for complex cases, and VSafe, which allows everyday recipients to do quick smartphone check-ins after their shot.
And it's all built on a foundation of transparency. By law, providers have to hand you a vaccine information statement before the needle even comes out. It tells you the exact benefits and the known risks in plain English. And the reality, backed by mountains of data, is that the vast majority of side effects are mild. The fatigue, the headache, the day of feeling feverish that we discussed earlier. Serious adverse events are extraordinarily rare.
And for those incredibly rare instances where a serious reaction does occur, the United States has a national vaccine injury compensation program. The philosophical core of this program is deeply community-oriented. If a rare harm comes to an individual, while they're actively protecting their broader community by maintaining herd immunity, it is the fundamental duty of that community to support them. But structurally, medically, the mathematics are clear. The risk of suffering permanent harm or death from the actual diseases infinitely outweighs the microscopic risk of the vaccine.
So what does this all mean for you? If we synthesize everything we've unpacked today from the immunology data, the big takeaway is that vaccines are not just a childhood checklist we leave behind with our kindergarten report cards. They are active, dynamic, lifelong tools. They prevent cancers from forming in our 20s. They prevent the agonizing, nerve-burning pain of shingles in our 50s. They protect our fragile organs in our 70s. They don't just dictate how long you live, but how well you get to live those years.
It's a profound shift in how we view preventative maintenance for our bodies. We maintain our cars and our homes. We must maintain our immune shields.
And the clinical guidelines leave us with a very specific, incredibly easy call to action. At your next doctor's visit, whether it's just a routine checkup, a follow-up, or even an urgent appointment, just ask your doctor this one simple question. Based on my age, my health conditions, and my lifestyle, am I up to date on all my vaccines? That is it. One sentence. It opens a door to a conversation that could legitimately save your life.
And as we close out this deep dive, I want to leave you with something to ponder. We've just explored how our highly evolved, brilliant immune system naturally forgets how to fight off these terrible diseases over time, requiring these tiny, carefully engineered scientific reminders to stay sharp. It really makes you wonder what other essential biological or cognitive systems in our bodies are quietly forgetting their basic training right now, just waiting for the right intervention to wake them back up.